right.
Judge.
Yes. And also now join us today via Zoom is Attorney Jeffrey Slocum on behalf of the plaintiff, Richard Dumont. Mr. Slocum, can you see and hear us, sir?
And good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Do we anticipate Mr. Dumont joining us today, Mr. Slocum?
I know they were having some problems with Zoom, so I guess let's proceed without them.
All right, let me take a look here. This is a motion filed by the defendants for a temporary restraining order and return of ashes.
Want this streamed?
I'm sorry?
Do you want this streamed?
Doesn't matter right now, it's fine. All right, let me take a look here.
If I could, Judge, we don't need to address the temporary restraining order. We stipulated to a restraining order that the court signed. The only issue would then be the issue relating the ashes.
All right, let me catch up here. There was a motion. Which one is Marilyn?
Marilyn's here, Judge.
And Marilyn was apparently married to Eugene.
Yes, 52 years.
And you, for how many?
52.
And were they married at the time of his death?
Yes.
And Richard Dumont, what is his relationship to Eugene and Marilyn?
Son.
So there's a home at 10141 West Roby Road here in Missaukee. Yeah, that's in Missaukee County, just across the county line up off nearby 72. Okay, and who has that home?
So that home belonged to Marilyn and Eugene, and they lived there their entire lives. They farmed and lived there. At some point, there was a deed that was done that added Richard to that deed. So that is then co-owned by Marilyn and Richard, with a ladybird deed with Marilyn and Kathy, who's her daughter, and Lisa, who's the other daughter.
Okay.
So Marilyn's portion would pass to the two daughters, but Richard has his portion already, and he owns that. The lawsuit was filed by way of a partition by Mr. Slocum.
Yep.
To partition at least those actions between Marilyn and Richard.
And who was in possession of the residence?
Marilyn.
Marilyn's still living there?
She's living at the home.
Does Richard reside at the home?
Used to, and now moved to a separate residence.
Is that separate residence still on the same acreage?
No.
Okay. All right.
Not subject to this litigation.
Now that I have a snapshot of what's going on, Mr. Garamurthy, your argument for your motion.
Thank you, Judge. I filed a counter complaint as well regarding personal property, which is a lot of farm equipment that was owned by the Dumas, Marilyn and Eugene. And my understanding in that counter complaint is, at least we've alleged, that Richard has taken possession of those, of these personal property items, and has them in his possession, wouldn't let anybody in the family go inventory it, take pictures. That issue was resolved by way of a temporary restraining order, that the items would not be sold, hidden, dissipated, and that the parties would be allowed to go inventory and take pictures and so on. And that's been done. The issue remains regarding the ashes. Eugene Dumont passed away in December of 2016, December 10th.
Oh, okay. So it's been a while.
It has. And the ashes were picked up in February of 2017. It is unclear if Marilyn was with Richard to pick up the ashes, or if Richard picked up the ashes by himself. However, the ashes were picked up from the funeral home, and Marilyn, after 52 years of marriage, was not in the most state of mind to take the ashes back.
All right. So if he passed away in December of 2016, what happened to the ashes after the cremation?
So Mr. Dumont, Richard Dumont, took the ashes, had it in his possession, and he told his mother that when you feel better, come back and get the ashes. She went to live with her sister for a few months, several months, and came back to, I think before she left, she asked for the ashes, and the response was, when you come back and feel better, you can get the ashes. When she came back after several months, the ashes were with Mr. Dumont, who resided on the same property that's in question. Miss Dumont, Marilyn Dumont, would visit that house regularly to see her husband.
Okay,
The siblings, I believe, also were there to see her husband, and that went on for several years.
they would go visit the ashes?
Yes,
Okay,
and it's in an urn, it's sealed, it's there. She would take flowers, she would take angels that she would make, and with the intent that she would get the ashes back and go and put them and lay them to rest. Mr. Dumont would never let her take the ashes and simply would tell her that he's fine where he is. Subsequently, the Dumonts moved, Richard Dumont moved. She hasn't had an opportunity to go visit her husband.
moved
get
from
the Roby Road address to
where
his new
where he
address.
was living with her.
He was living on the same property, which was just across the street down the road.
It was a separate
It
property.
was a separate
Separate
property. It was
Separate
not,
property.
but it
It'd
was
have to be if it's across the street, different parcel.
a different parcel, right? It was,
Okay.
she would go right over, but now they've moved several miles down. She's not allowed to go there, not visit, not get her ashes. And she's entitled to her ashes. She has priority under the law. She's made that request for several years. She had access to that, and Mr. Dumont just won't return her husband's ashes.
Okay, all right, Mr. Slocum, on behalf.
I would
of
simply
I'm
also
sorry.
state that Ms. Dumont would take the stand and testify to those as an offer of approval, what I've stated under oath.
Okay,
And the two siblings are here. I believe the statute also further states that if there are other people with equal right, which I don't believe they have equal right, or the court would determine there were children, the two children would vote essentially that mom should get the ashes back.
okay. Mr. Slocum, do we need to take some testimony, or what is it you'd like to add today?
Well, first of all, I don't know if the court has had an opportunity to take a look at the answer that we filed, but we believe that MCL 700.3206 is dispositive of this issue. Ms. Dumont, who has filed this motion, the attorney, has asked for a return of the ashes. What are we, 7 years now after it's 7 years after the incident? My client, the statute is very specific that she would have the right for the first 48 hours to exercise that right. If she doesn't exercise that right, she waives that right. Specifically says she's waived the right to make the decision about the possession of the cremains. My client is the one who paid for the burial, for the funeral expenses, everything associated with with Mr. Dumont's funeral expenses. And she did not do anything. And for her to come at this point and to say, and to argue this under a temporary motion, I mean, presumably we'd have a trial coming eventually. And then if the court wants to put this down for that, I would understand that. At the very least, if you want to do a temporary restraining order in relation to the ashes, that's fine too. But this is not the right forum. And
Let's go ahead.
She's not even entitled to it in the first place.
All right, let's go ahead and take some testimony. By the way, I don't think this is going to go very well for the defendant. Miss Marilyn, why don't you come on up? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information and testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, ma'am? You may have a seat at the witness stand. Thank you. Mr. Garamurthy, the court recognizes that this is the plaintiff. I'm sorry, defendant. Thank you. You may continue. I'm sorry, I said it wrong earlier. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Ma'am, would you state your full name for the record and spell your last name? You want me to speak a little louder, or you heard my question?
Spell my last,
Yeah, spell your last name.
Gumont.
Okay, and what's your full name?
Marilyn K. Dumont.
Make sure you speak up, man. Mr. Garamurthy, if you could slide that microphone just a little bit closer. It doesn't amplify, it only picks up and goes into the ear of the court reporter. We just must make sure that she's able to get down what you're saying, Ms. Dumont. You may continue, Mr. Garamurthy.
Marilyn, you were married to Eugene Dumont, correct?
Correct.
How long were you married to Eugene for?
52 years.
Okay. Do you remember when Eugene passed away?
Yes.
What was his date of death?
Pardon me.
What was the date of death?
December 10th, 2016.
Okay. Do you remember at some point picking up his ashes or having one of your children pick up his ashes?
I remember them going after the ashes.
Okay, what do you remember? If you would tell Judge Elmore what you remember.
I don't remember if I was with them at that time.
Make sure you speak up, ma'am. I know you're soft-spoken.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know it's emotional. All right. Never mind. She says she's got it. Just keep going ahead.
I remember them talking, bringing them to their home,
Who's them?
Richard and his wife Shannon.
Okay.
And I was there and I talked to them. And I said, I cannot handle this right now. I'm sorry.
It's okay, ma'am. Just keep going. And I'm sorry, Mr. Gurumurthy, I know you've directed her to talk to me. I know she's responded to your questions. I'm not trying to ask her questions.
That's fine, Judge.
Thank you.
You remember talking to Richard,
Yeah,
and do you remember what you told Richard?
I told him I can't handle taking him home right then. Would he please keep him at his house? And he said, yes, when I got better, I could come and get them. And
Do you remember asking Richard for the ashes subsequently?
later I asked for them and he said they're all right where they are.
Okay. Do you remember within how many days or how soon, how many months later you asked?
Oh, I went home with my three sisters came and got me. But I don't know how long I stayed there. It was a while.
And then when you came back to your home on Roby Road, did you visit with Eugene?
I went to visit with him. I brought him a statue and some flowers.
Okay. Where were you visiting Eugene?
They had Eugene kind of up on it's like an attic stairs thing. And I had to be down here. I couldn't go up there. There was no way for me to go up.
Okay. And when you said they, was that at Richard and Shannon's house?
Yes,
Okay. And for how long did you go to Richard's house to visit with Eugene?
how often?
Yeah.
Oh, I was there probably 2-3 times a week. I was down at his house.
Okay. And for what length of time? Was it for a month? Was it for a year, 2 years? Do you remember?
Oh, it was over a year.
It was over a year. During that time frame, did you ask Richard to get the ashes back?
Yes, and he said they were fine right where they are.
Okay. And subsequently, Richard moved, right?
Richard moved to a different home.
Okay. Were you able to then visit with Eugene at Richard's new home?
No, I was not allowed at his place.
Okay. And you didn't file this lawsuit, you just filed a countersuit after a lawsuit was then initiated by your son, correct?
Right,
Okay,
right.
all right. I don't believe I have any further questions, Judge.
Mr. Slocum, do you have any questions for Miss Dumont?
Yes, I do. Ms. Dumont, did your son, Richard, pay for the funeral expenses for your husband?
Yes, he did. I asked him not to, and he said he wanted to, and that was for his dad. And he wanted to do that.
Okay, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Anything further, Mr. Gurumurthy?
I have nothing further, Judge.
All right. Ms. Dumont, you may have a seat back at the table. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any argument necessary, Mr. Gurumurthy?
Just, I would simply say that it's not relevant who paid for it. That's not what the statute requires. But we're not challenging the issue of who paid for it. If Mr. Dumont wants that money back, he can petition probate court. There's an avenue for that. The statute, again, as Mr. Slocum indicates, doesn't say 48 hours. It simply says 72 hours to locate the next person who has priority. Everybody since 2016 knows who has priority. Ms. Dumont, again, was located. They know who she is. She's there. She's present. She's visiting with him, or with her son, and with her deceased husband. There's next of kin two other siblings who have again indicated that they have equal priority if for some reason the court determines that the mother doesn't, who would ask that that the mother get the ashes and it should not be with the children. But again, the statute is very clear that the first priority is with the surviving spouse.
Thank
We
you.
know who the surviving spouse is. We've known all along who it is.
Thank you. Mr. Slocum, any arguments, sir?
Yes, again, as I said, I think the statute is dispositive. My client's the one that paid for it. Ms. Dumont had the right to exercise the rights. Here now, 7 years later, even if, there's statute of limitations for this as well. If the court were to follow the law, this is quite clear. My client's entitled to them. And I'm not saying that my client, has offered to give them half to work out something, but even if the law were not dispositive, which it is, this is still not the right forum to make a determination about a permanent disposition of these ashes. So for the fact that the law is not on their side, that this is not the right forum, and that I'm willing to enter a temporary restraining order regarding the ashes until we can get to the right forum, which would be a trial in this matter, then this motion needs to be denied.
Mr. Garamurthy, come forward for just a moment. Mr. Garamurthy, I'm telling you that I have an addiction to my cell phone. I tend to scroll too much on it. Would you please hold on to my phone and take it back to the podium?
Yes.
Is that your cell phone?
No,
Whose phone is it?
it's Judge Elmore's.
Bingo. Ms. Dumont did not reject acceptance of them. She just merely asked for her son to hold on to them for a while, as I just did Mr. Garamurthy. He doesn't own my phone, and I didn't give up ownership to the phone. I'm going to treat this as a motion for a preliminary injunction as well. The court will grant the motion for the restraining order and will grant an injunction that directs the plaintiff, Mr. Richard Dumont, to give the ashes to his mom. Thank you.
Judge, my only question is, can that be retrieved today?
He has to give the ashes to her by 5 o'clock today. The order will also include that he is not to waste any, he's not to take any, he's not to divide them up, he's not to empty them, he's not to sprinkle them. She never gave up ownership of them. She entrusted her son to hold on to them. For a preliminary injunction, the court only has to look at the likelihood of success and potentially, the court finds that this is in favor of turning over the ashes to the wife. I can't believe we're here today. Thank you. Mr. Garamurthy, if you could draft the order.
Oh, I would draft it right away and get it over, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
I could approach.
Thank you for
Thank
my
you, Your
phone,
Honor.
by the way.